Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to speak to you about something that touches every one of us. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter how much wealth you possess or how much success you achieve, there will come a time when you face difficulties. Life will press upon you with burdens too heavy to carry, storms too fierce to withstand, and trials too complex to unravel. And in those moments, when the weight of the world is upon your shoulders, I want to urge you, invite God into your difficulties. Some of you here tonight are going through storms so great that you feel as if you're drowning. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one, a financial struggle, an illness, or a broken relationship. Maybe it's fear, uncertainty about the future, a heavy guilt from the past, or a loneliness that grips your soul in the quiet of the night. You have tried to fix it yourself, and yet nothing changes. You have tried to carry it alone, but your strength is failing. You have searched for answers, but the darkness remains. My friend, have you invited God into your struggle? Have you placed your burdens before the one who holds the heavens and the earth in his hands? You see, we live in a world where people try to be self-sufficient. Society teaches us that we must be strong, that we must find a way to solve our own problems, that we must rely on our own wisdom. But let me tell you, my friends, there are difficulties in life that no human strength can overcome. There are battles too great for us to fight on our own. And that is why God, in his infinite love and mercy, calls us to turn to him, to lean upon him, to trust in him with all our hearts. Throughout the Bible, we see time and time again how God walks with his people through their greatest trials. When the children of Israel stood trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, they thought all hope was lost. But they cried out to God, and he made a way where there was no way. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, he did not despair. He trusted in the Lord, and God shut the mouths of the lions. When David stood before the giant Goliath, he did not rely on his own strength. He relied on the power of God, and the giant fell before him. And yet so often we forget. When trials come, we panic. We try to fix everything ourselves. We run to friends, to family, to the internet, to distractions. But how often do we first run to God? How often do we truly lay our burdens before him and say, Lord, I cannot do this on my own, but I know that you are able. God never promised that life would be easy. He never said that we would not have hardships. But he did promise this: I will never leave you nor forsake you. He did say, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And he assures us, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. My dear friends, I don't know what burden you are carrying tonight, but I do know this: God is greater than any burden. He is stronger than any storm. He is more powerful than any fear, any pain, any trial you will ever face. And he is waiting for you to invite him into your struggle. Some of you may say, but I have sinned too much. I have wandered too far. I have ignored God for too long. Let me tell you, God is a God of mercy. He does not wait for you to be perfect before he steps in. He does not demand that you first fix everything before coming to him. No, he says, come as you are. He says, call upon me in the day of trouble, I will deliver you. He says, cast all your cares upon me, for I care for you. And so tonight, I urge you, whatever you are facing, whatever burden you carry, whatever storm is raging around you, invite God in. Cry out to him. Surrender it to him. And trust that he is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you could ask or imagine. My friends, when we invite God into our difficulties, we are not just asking for relief. We are surrendering to his wisdom, his plan, and his perfect will. You see, God does not always remove the storm immediately, but he always walks with us through it. Think of the disciples on the Sea of Galilee. A mighty storm arose. The winds howled and the waves crashed against their boat. They feared for their lives, but Jesus was there with them. He was in the boat, and when they cried out to him, he stood and rebuked the wind and the waves, and there was a great calm. Tonight, I want you to understand this. When you invite God into your difficulties, you are not alone in the storm. The same God who calmed the sea is with you in your hardship. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is still the God who delivers, the God who heals, the God who makes a way where there is no way. But listen closely. Sometimes God does not calm the storm immediately because He is using it to shape you, to refine you, to draw you closer to Him. He is teaching you to trust Him in the midst of the waves, to cling to Him when everything else is uncertain. Some of the greatest lessons of faith are learned not in the calm, but in the storm. Look at Job. He was a righteous man, yet he suffered more than most could imagine. He lost his wealth, his family, his health. His friends accused him. His wife told him to curse God and die. But Job did not turn away from God. He invited God into his suffering. He said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." And in the end, God restored him and blessed him even more than before. Some of you are wondering, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this trial? My friends, I do not have all the answers, but I know this. God does. He sees the full picture. He knows what is best for you. And if you invite Him into your difficulties, He will work all things together for good. Maybe you are struggling with a broken relationship, a marriage that is on the verge of collapse. Have you invited God into it? Have you surrendered it to Him? Maybe you are battling addiction, a stronghold that seems impossible to break. Have you asked God for His strength? Maybe you are facing financial hardship and the bills are piling up. Have you trusted God as your provider? The problem is that too many of us invite God only as a last resort. We try everything else first. We exhaust all our own resources, our own wisdom, our own strength. And when nothing works, then we finally say, "God, I need you." But what if we turn to Him first? What if, instead of carrying the burden alone, we immediately laid it at His feet? God is not a distant observer in your life. He is not an uninterested bystander. He cares deeply for you. He knows every tear you have cried, every sleepless night, every fear that grips your heart. He sees the weight you are carrying, and He is calling you tonight to let Him in. But my friends, inviting God into your difficulties is not just about asking Him to fix your problems. It is about surrendering your life completely to Him. It is about saying, "Lord, I trust you no matter what. Even if the storm does not pass right away, even if the road is still difficult, I will trust you." Do you remember the three Hebrew men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They refused to bow to the king's idol, and as a result, they were thrown into a fiery furnace. But they did not waver in their faith. They said, "Our God is able to deliver us, but even if He does not, we will still serve Him." And what happened? God did not keep them from the fire. He joined them in the fire. This is the promise of God. He may not always remove the trial, but He will always be with you in it. You are never alone. You are never forsaken. The God of all creation is standing beside you, walking with you, carrying you through every valley. Tonight He is knocking on the door of your heart. Will you let Him in? Will you invite Him into your pain, your sorrow, your difficulty? He is ready to give you peace that surpasses all understanding. He is ready to give you strength where you have none. He is ready to lift your burden and carry you through. My friends, when you invite God into your difficulties, something remarkable happens. You begin to see His hand at work in ways you never imagined. You begin to experience peace in the midst of the storm, strength when you feel weak, and hope when everything seems hopeless. You see, when God steps into your situation, it doesn't mean the problem disappears immediately, but it does mean you are no longer facing it alone. It means that the same God who created the universe, who parted the Red Sea, who raised the dead, is now standing beside you, fighting for you and making a way where there seems to be no way. Think about Paul and Silas in that prison cell. They had been beaten, humiliated, and locked away in chains. By all human reasoning, they had every reason to despair. But instead of weeping in sorrow, they worshiped God. They sang hymns of praise in the midnight hour. And what happened? God shook the prison walls. He broke their chains. He opened the doors. Do you see what happens when you invite God into your difficulty? He does what no human can do. He brings victory in the midst of defeat. He turns sorrow into joy, mourning into dancing, and despair into hope. But some of you may be saying, I have prayed. I have cried out to God, and yet my situation has not changed. My friend, I want you to know this. Just because you don't see immediate change does not mean God is not working. His timing is perfect. His ways are higher than our ways. When Lazarus fell ill, his sisters sent word to Jesus, pleading with him to come. But Jesus delayed. He did not come immediately, and Lazarus died. To the human eye, it seemed like all hope was lost. But Jesus knew what he was doing. When he finally arrived, he called Lazarus forth from the grave, and what seemed like the end became a testimony of resurrection power. Some of you feel like your situation is hopeless, like God has delayed too long, like there is no way forward. But let me tell you, God is never late. He is always on time. He sees the full picture, and he is working behind the scenes in ways you cannot see. Maybe he is using this trial to strengthen your faith. Maybe he is teaching you to rely on him instead of your own understanding. Maybe he is positioning you for a greater blessing, a greater purpose, a greater testimony than you could ever imagine. But you must trust him. You must surrender completely. You must say, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. I don't see the way, but I trust that you are making a way. I don't have the strength, but I trust that you will sustain me. My friends, tonight I urge you, let go of the burden you have been carrying alone. Stop trying to figure it all out by yourself. Stop allowing fear, doubt, and anxiety to control your heart. Invite God into your difficulty and watch what he will do. He is the God who shuts the mouths of lions. He is the God who walks through the fire with you. He is the God who speaks peace to the storm. He is the God who breaks chains, opens prison doors, and raises the dead to life. And that same God is here tonight calling you to trust him, to lean on him, to invite him into every part of your life, not just in the good times, not just when everything is going well, but in the moments of struggle, in the moments of fear, in the moments when you feel like giving up. He is ready to lift you up. He is ready to strengthen you. He is ready to carry you through. But the question is, will you let him? Too often we hesitate. We hesitate to surrender fully to God because we want control. We hesitate because we think we have to understand everything before we trust him. But faith does not require full understanding. Faith requires full surrender. Think of Peter walking on water. When Jesus called him, Peter stepped out of the boat. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he walked on the waves. But the moment he looked at the wind and the storm, he began to sink. That is what happens when we focus on the problem instead of the problem solver. But even as Peter began to go under, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and lifted him up. That is the God we serve, a God who does not let you sink, a God who reaches down even when you feel like you are drowning. But you must call on him. You must invite him in. Some of you tonight are standing in the middle of a storm, and the waves feel overwhelming. The enemy wants you to believe that you are alone. He wants you to believe that there is no way out. But I am here to tell you that the enemy is a liar. God is with you, and he is greater than anything you are facing. The enemy will tell you God doesn't care about you, but God says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. The enemy will say you are too weak. But God says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. The enemy will say, you are alone. But God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. The enemy will say, this situation is hopeless. But God says, with man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. My friends, if you hear nothing else tonight, hear this. You are not alone. God is with you. He is waiting for you to invite him into your difficulty. He is ready to move in ways that will leave you in awe of his power and love. The question is, will you trust him? Will you surrender your burden? Will you stop trying to carry it alone and allow the Almighty God to step into your situation? When you do, you will find that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and mind. You will find that His strength is enough for you. You will find that even in the darkest night, His light will guide you. I do not know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. And I know that if you place your trust in Him, if you invite Him into every trial, every difficulty, every hardship, He will carry you through. So tonight, make the decision. Stop carrying the burden alone. Invite God in, trust Him completely, and watch as He does what only He can do. When you invite God into your difficulties, you are placing your life into the hands of the one who sees the end from the beginning. You are no longer walking through the storm alone. You are no longer fighting battles in your own strength. You are no longer relying on your limited understanding, but rather you are standing on the unshakable promises of God. Some of you tonight have been wrestling with fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear that your situation will never change. But the Bible tells us God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. When you invite God into your difficulties, He replaces fear with faith, anxiety with peace, and despair with hope. Think about Moses. When God called him to lead Israel out of Egypt, he was afraid. He doubted himself. He questioned whether he was capable. But God did not ask Moses to rely on his own strength. He simply asked Moses to trust Him. And when Moses invited God into the difficulty, miracles happened. The Red Sea parted, manna fell from heaven, water flowed from a rock. That same God is at work in your life. He is not distant. He is not unaware of your struggles. He is waiting for you to trust Him completely. Some of you may be thinking, but I have prayed and I have not seen an answer. My friend, just because you don't see the answer right away does not mean God is not working. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. For years he suffered. It must have seemed as if God was silent, but all the while God was positioning him for a greater purpose. When the time was right, Joseph was lifted from the prison to the palace, and what the enemy meant for evil, God turned for good. Your difficulty is not the end of the story. God is still writing. The pain you feel today may be the very thing that prepares you for the blessing of tomorrow. The struggle you are going through may be the training ground for a testimony that will bring glory to God, but you must trust Him. You must invite Him in. And let me say this, inviting God into your difficulties does not mean the road will always be easy, but it does mean you will never walk it alone. The 3 Hebrew men were thrown into the fiery furnace, but they were not alone. There was a 4th man in the fire. Daniel was cast into the lion's den, but he was not alone. God shut the mouths of the lions. Paul and Silas were locked in prison, but they were not alone. God shook the foundations and set them free. What you are facing right now may seem impossible. It may seem like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But God is greater. He is greater than your pain, greater than your worry, greater than your struggle. And if you surrender it to Him, if you invite Him into your situation, He will carry you through. So don't give up. Don't lose heart. Don't let the enemy convince you that you are alone. You are not alone. You never have been and you never will be. The God who spoke the stars into existence, the God who holds the universe in His hands, the God who defeated sin and death, He is with you. And He is ready to move in your life. Will you trust Him? Will you invite Him in? Will you let go of your burden and place it in His hands? Because when you do, you will find that His grace is sufficient, His strength is perfect, and His love will never fail. When you invite God into your difficulties, you are making a declaration of trust. You are saying, Lord, I cannot do this on my own, but I know that You can. And let me tell you, God never fails those who trust in Him. The enemy will try to whisper lies into your heart. He will tell you that your situation is too big, that your pain is too deep, that your failures are too great. But I want you to know that there is no mountain too high, no valley too low, and no sin too great for God's grace to reach. The same God who turned water into wine, who healed the blind, who made the lame walk and who raised the dead to life. He is still the same today. You may feel like your situation is too far gone. You may think there is no way out. Well, I want to remind you of something. God is the God of the impossible. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind them, it seemed like there was no escape. But what did God do? He made a way where there was no way. He parted the sea and led his people to safety. Maybe today you feel like you're standing before an impossible situation. You don't see a way forward, but let me tell you, God has already made a way. You may not see it yet, but he is working behind the scenes. He is preparing your deliverance. He is moving on your behalf. The key is to trust him in the waiting. That is where faith is tested. That is where character is built. That is where you come to know God in a deeper way, because it is in the fire that faith is refined. It is in the storm that we learn to trust in the one who calms the sea. Think about Abraham. God promised him a son, but years went by and still no child came. Abraham could have given up. He could have doubted God's promise. But the Bible says, against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. And in God's perfect timing, the promise was fulfilled. Some of you tonight are in the waiting. You are wondering if God will come through. You are wondering if the answer will ever come. I want to encourage you, don't let go of your faith. Don't stop believing, because the God who promised is faithful and he will not fail you. Maybe you are facing a trial that no one else understands. Maybe you are carrying a burden that feels too heavy to bear. Maybe you feel like you have no strength left to keep going. My friend, now is the time to invite God in. Now is the time to lay that burden at his feet. Now is the time to surrender fully to him. The Bible tells us, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. You were never meant to carry this weight alone. You were never meant to fight this battle in your own strength. God is calling you to surrender. He is calling you to trust. He is calling you to invite him into your difficulty and let him work in ways beyond your understanding. And let me tell you something. When you do, you will see his faithfulness. You will see his power. You will see him take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it for good. You will see that no matter how hard the trial, no matter how fierce the storm, God is greater. So tonight I ask you, will you trust him? Will you surrender? Will you invite him into your difficulty and allow him to do what only he can do? Because when you do, you will find that he is faithful, he is strong, and he will never let you down. When you invite God into your difficulties, you are no longer relying on your own strength. You are stepping into his power, his wisdom, and his divine plan. And my friends, when God steps into a situation, things change. You may not see it immediately. You may not feel it right away. But I assure you, he is working. He is moving. He is orchestrating things behind the scenes in ways you could never imagine. Think about the disciples when they were caught in the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The wind was raging, the waves were crashing, and they were terrified. But then in the middle of their fear, Jesus came walking on the water. And when he stepped into their boat, the storm ceased. That's what happens when you invite Jesus into your storm. Peace enters, fear flees, and you are reminded that the one who controls the wind and the waves is by your side. But here's something important to remember. Sometimes God doesn't calm the storm right away. Sometimes he calms his child first. Sometimes he strengthens you in the midst of the storm before he brings you out of it. And that's because he's more interested in transforming you than just changing your circumstances. Some of you are asking, why hasn't God taken away this difficulty? But maybe the better question is, what is God doing in me through this difficulty? Because, my friends, God is always working. He's refining you, shaping you, and preparing you for something greater. The Apostle Paul understood this. He had a thorn in the flesh, a trial that he pleaded with God to take away. But God's answer was not to remove it. His answer was, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Maybe you are facing a difficulty that God has not yet removed. Maybe you are praying for an answer that hasn't come. But I want to tell you, His grace is sufficient. His strength is perfect. And if you keep trusting Him, if you keep inviting Him into every moment, you will see that He is enough. There is something powerful about surrender. When we finally let go of trying to fix everything ourselves and place it in God's hands, we find freedom. We find peace. We find the strength to endure because we know we are not alone. The enemy wants to wear you down. He wants you to believe that you can't make it through. But God says otherwise. He says, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. He says, I am your refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. So don't let the enemy steal your joy. Don't let him rob you of the peace that comes from trusting in God. Instead, stand firm in faith. Keep believing, keep worshiping, keep inviting God into every difficulty, knowing that He's working all things together for your good. My friends, God is faithful. He has never failed, and He will not start now. Your situation may be overwhelming, but He is greater. Your burden may be heavy, but He is stronger. And if you surrender to Him, if you invite Him in, you will see His hand move in ways beyond anything you could ask or imagine. So tonight, make that choice. Let go of fear. Let go of worry. Place it all in God's hands and trust Him to carry you through. Because when you do, you will discover that He is more than enough as you continue to walk through life's difficulties. It is important to remember that inviting God into your struggles is not a one-time event. It's not just about asking for help in a moment of crisis and then moving on. It's about a daily choice to surrender your will, your fears, and your uncertainties to Him. This is what it means to walk by faith, not by sight. Faith is not based on our understanding or our ability to control the outcome. It is rooted in the trust that God is good, that He is faithful, and that He is working for our good, even when we cannot see it. When we face trials, we often focus on what we can't control, the hurt, the pain, the disappointment, the fear. But God calls us to focus on what we can control. Our response. Will we trust Him in the storm? Will we invite Him into our difficulties every day, not just when we feel desperate, but even in the ordinary moments of life? Jesus tells us in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He doesn't say that He will take away the burden, but He promises rest for our souls. He promises that as we walk with Him, He will help us bear the weight of life's struggles. I encourage you, friend, to find rest in Him today. When you invite God into your difficulties, you're also inviting His rest, His peace, His strength. And that rest isn't passive. It's not about doing nothing. It's about trusting God to carry the burden that you were never meant to carry alone. The great comfort we have as believers is that God doesn't just leave us to fend for ourselves. He is walking alongside us. He is holding us up. He is strengthening us in our weakness. And the beauty of it is, when we invite Him in, He gives us the strength to endure in ways we never could on our own. Think about the Apostle Paul again. He was a man who experienced suffering beyond what most of us can imagine. He was shipwrecked, beaten, imprisoned, and rejected. Yet in the midst of it all, Paul knew that he was not alone. He knew that God was with him, and that knowledge gave him the strength to keep going. In 2 Corinthians 12:10, Paul says, "That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." This is the paradox of the Christian life. When we are weak, we are strong, because God's power is made perfect in our weakness. So, my friends, when you invite God into your difficulties, you are not just inviting a solution. You are inviting the strength to endure. You are inviting God's grace to carry you through the most difficult seasons of your life. And you will find that in His presence, your strength is renewed. I know some of you may be struggling right now. You may feel overwhelmed by what you are facing. But I encourage you to take heart. God sees you. He knows what you are going through. And He is waiting for you to invite Him in. He is waiting for you to surrender your fears, your anxieties, your doubts, and your hurts into His loving hands. He is waiting to give you peace in the storm. He is waiting to carry you through the darkest valleys. He is waiting to show you that He is faithful. You may not see the way forward yet. You may not understand why things are happening the way they are, but trust this: God is working. He is on your side, and when you invite Him into your difficulties, He will make a way where there seems to be no way. So I ask you tonight, will you trust Him? Will you invite Him into every area of your life? Will you stop trying to carry the burden alone and surrender it to Him? The God who parted the Red Sea is the same God who is with you right now. The God who healed the sick and raised the dead is the same God who is walking with you through your trials. The God who calms the storm and gives peace to the troubled heart is the same God who desires to give you rest. And when you invite Him in, you will see that He is faithful. You will see that He is enough. You will see that He is working all things together for your good, even in the most difficult of times. So let go, surrender, invite Him in, and trust that He will carry you through. Because when you do, you will find that He is the answer, the strength, the hope, and the peace that you've been searching for all along. My friends, God is with you. He is for you, and He will never leave you or forsake you. Trust Him. Invite Him into your difficulties and watch as He moves in ways you never imagined. As you continue to trust God and invite Him into your struggles, you will discover that His presence brings a transformation beyond anything you could ever achieve on your own. When we allow Him to be Lord over every area of our lives, including our difficulties, we are choosing to walk by faith and not by sight. We are choosing to say, Lord, I believe that your plan is greater than mine, even when I don't understand what you are doing. This kind of surrender is not easy. It requires humility, and it requires us to relinquish our need for control. But it is in this very surrender that we find freedom. When we hold on to the burden, when we try to carry everything ourselves, it feels heavy and unbearable. But when we release it to God, His yoke is easy and His burden is light. He takes what feels impossible for us and turns it into a testimony of His power and faithfulness. It is important to remember that God's timing is perfect, even when it feels like He is taking too long to answer. Sometimes God is not just working on the situation, He is working on you. He is shaping your character, teaching you patience, and helping you grow in ways that only difficulty can produce. But trust me, when you look back, you will see that it was worth it. You will see how God used that trial to refine you, to mold you into the person He has called you to be. There is a beautiful story in the Bible about the Apostle Paul, who, after facing years of persecution and hardship, could still say with confidence, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstance. Philippians 4:11, how could Paul say that? It wasn't because he had a perfect life. It wasn't because his troubles magically disappeared. It was because he had learned to invite God into every situation, to trust Him with every difficulty. And as a result, Paul found peace in the midst of turmoil, strength in the face of weakness, and hope in the darkest of circumstances. God is calling you to the same kind of faith. He is calling you to trust Him, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because He is perfect. And His plans are always for your good. No matter how dark the night, His light will shine through. No matter how strong the storm, His peace will calm your heart. When we invite God into our difficulties, it doesn't mean we won't face challenges. It doesn't mean the road will be easy, but it does mean that we are never alone. It means that we have a Savior who understands our pain, who is moved by our suffering, and who is ready to step into our lives and bring His healing and restoration. It means that we can find strength to keep going, even when we feel like giving up. It means that we can find hope in the midst of despair. And it means that we can find purpose in the pain, knowing that God is using every hardship to bring us closer to Him and to prepare us for the future He has in store for us. You might be asking, how do I invite God into my difficulties? What does that look like in real life? It starts with a simple prayer, a prayer of surrender. It's a prayer that says, Lord, I don't understand why this is happening, but I trust that you are in control. I invite you into this situation. I give you my fear, my pain, my doubt, and my confusion. I trust that you will guide me through this and that you will use this trial for your glory. And as you pray, know that God is listening. He is near to the brokenhearted, and He will never turn away from a heart that seeks Him. His word promises that He will give wisdom to those who ask, and He will provide comfort and strength to those who call upon His name. One of the most powerful things you can do in the midst of difficulty is to keep your focus on God's word. The Bible is filled with promises of God's faithfulness, and meditating on those promises can help you maintain your peace. Remember what He has said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," Psalm 23:01. He is the one who will provide for your every need. The Lord is near to all who call on Him, Psalm 145:18. He is never far from you, even when you feel like you are walking alone. And don't forget the importance of community. The church is not just a place for worship, it is a place for support, encouragement, and prayer. Surround yourself with people who will pray for you, who will walk alongside you, and who will remind you of God's truth when you need it most. We were never meant to face life's challenges in isolation. God has given us each other to lift each other up. As you continue to trust God and invite Him into your struggles, you will find that His presence makes all the difference. His peace will guard your heart and mind. His strength will sustain you when you feel weak, and His love will never fail. So don't let the difficulties you face define you. Don't let the struggles steal your joy. Invite God into the storm and watch Him move in ways you could never have imagined. He is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, more than all we ask or think. When you invite Him in, you are inviting hope, peace, and transformation into your life, and I promise you, the same God who parted the Red Sea, who healed the sick, who raised the dead, He is the same God who is with you now, and He will carry you through. As you step out in faith, know that God is with you every step of the way. His love is unchanging, His faithfulness is unwavering, and His power is limitless. Keep inviting Him in. Keep trusting Him. Keep believing that with God, all things are possible. And as you continue to invite God into your difficulties, there will come a point when you look back and realize that He has been with you all along. It may not be until you are on the other side of the storm that you truly see how God used that hardship to refine you, to strengthen your faith, and to draw you closer to Him. But make no mistake, He has been working in ways you couldn't have imagined, preparing you for something greater. I want to remind you that the invitation to invite God into your difficulties is not a one-time act. It's a daily decision. It's a commitment to trust Him even when the path ahead is unclear, even when the road feels impossibly long. It's a choice to surrender your own plans, your own understanding, and to follow Him, knowing that His ways are higher than ours. And so I ask you today, wherever you are, whatever you are facing, will you invite Him in? Will you stop carrying the weight alone and allow God to take it upon Himself? Will you trust Him to lead you through your difficulty? Will you rely on His wisdom, His strength, and His love? Because, my friend, when you invite God into your difficulties, everything changes. Your burdens become lighter. Your fears begin to fade. Your heart will find peace that transcends understanding. The storm may not disappear immediately, but you will never walk through it alone. You will have the Creator of the universe walking beside you, leading you, carrying you through the hard times. Jesus offers us peace that the world cannot give. He promises that He will never leave us or forsake us. His grace is sufficient for all of our needs, and in our weakness, His strength is made perfect. He has proven His faithfulness time and time again throughout history, and He will prove it in your life as well. So tonight, as you think about the difficulties you are facing, I encourage you, bring them before God. Surrender them to Him. Invite Him into every part of your life, even the parts that seem too hard or too broken. because when you do, you will find that He is more than enough. He is the one who makes all things possible. Let me say one final thing. The God who calmed the storm for the disciples is the same God who calms the storms in your life. He is faithful, He is strong, and He is capable of turning every trial into a testimony. And when you invite Him into your difficulties, you will see His hand move in ways you never thought possible. So don't wait. Don't try to carry the weight alone. Don't try to figure it all out on your own. Trust Him, invite Him in, and as you do, you will experience the peace, the strength, and the power of God in your life. He is with you. He will never leave you, and He will always see you through. As we close tonight, I encourage you to take a moment to pray, to invite God into your struggles, and to surrender your heart and your situation to Him. Trust that He will be with you, and that He will work all things together for your good. And when you look back, you will be able to say with confidence, God was with me and He brought me through. Amen.